And the word intrinsic really comes back to what Bill was talking about, the bottom-up systems. Lately, we've been involved in those quite a bit. It's been quite an adventure, and I'll tell you more about those. But originally, the way I started my office was really thinking that I did not want to specialize in one specific area, but rather think of architecture as something to be investigated deeper and to actually consider the work as being very widespread. So that meant we did a lot of competitions, we had a lot of exhibitions, and we did commercial and residential, which seems to be quite strange for certain people who hire you, because they're always like, are you residential or commercial? We are actually just architects. And then also the one thing I realized is that through competitions and exhibitions, we actually got a lot of explorations in the work, so I'll show some of those, but also we got a lot of projects. And the first kind of maybe issue we were very, very interested in was the idea of smart skin and how it related to industrial design. So very much, I'm a very frustrated car designer, I think, or a frustrated car designer because I'm not one. And I'm jealous of the fact that in car design you can have massive innovations, and particularly on small detail, where you, as you can see here, I always tend to photograph airplane wings, parts of the car, and sort of thinking about architecture and thinking, why can I not make windows like that? So actually quite a lot of our projects think about that, and that goes back to the idea of what I figured out in the beginning is that organic systems and industrial design share this, where fragmentation is actually about optimization, that they embed intelligence, and that very often it's bottom-up in the sense that it has feedback on different levels, system to system, people to system, or in architecture, city to system. And fragmentation, as we all know, especially in nature, is very much about not only cell splitting, but reproduction and becoming more and more intelligent. So it's not just fragmentation in the sense the way the leaves start to form themselves to be able to catch more light or to produce more, but also the cell splitting makes the system grow. And we all know the idea of the internet, where our messages split up and fragment in order to go faster and more optimized through the system in order to end up, most of the time, in the end of the world, very, very fast. And bottom-up systems are, of course, very interesting because they play with the top-down, bottom-up, and so it always means the big fish eats the small fish, but the big fish is being eaten as well. Another project which is still in this kind of idea of surface and the kind of idea of sort of super flatness which can then fragment is the Vestry Building we currently just finished in Tribeca, where we not only optimized the facade system, but also started to think about, you know, if a building is normally just a building and you have facades all around, how can we optimize the north street facade versus the south garden facade? Very different conditions and definitely worth optimizing in many ways. But it gave us a great opportunity to not only do that in facade systems, and it was super accentuated and very, very deep south facade, and a very flat, pixelated north facade, but also in the floor slabs. So what you saw here actually is that what we did is we compressed the floor slabs extremely towards the north and the street, and we opened them up and cut them shorter, creating double spaces towards the south. Also, again, I guess I hate hallways. I've never, I think, made a real hallway except to go to the lobby or the elevator. But the idea that you compress space and you open up space, that it kind of eliminates the need for walls and separation. So here, the other thing, of course, what's very interesting, and in New York, we do all kinds of things with cars. Some people put them in elevators. I put them underground with an elevator. So we have a parking underground here. We also have all the mechanical systems in the back of the garden, so you don't have anything on the penthouse. And every floor essentially is completely different. Really interesting also about working as we do now all in digital systems is that there is no need for the kind of repetition and prefabrication we used to develop in the 50s, which were super efficient, but we can do that same efficiency and the same prefabrication without having to repeat the same unit over and over. So here, this building essentially has only 7 units, and every unit is different. There's 2 triplexes, one with a double height space here and a ground floor, one with a double height space and a balcony, and then every floor, full floor different, and a penthouse which more or less looks like a separate kind of house on top of another house. So we actually call this a set of stacked villas, and the idea being that if you buy your dwelling, why would you have to have the same as anyone else? What's also really nice is if you get this one moment where you just have the concrete. I find this really extremely hard to build concrete in New York, and it seems like an impossible thing to do, and it kind of is. But the beauty being that it really takes structure to another level. You can have obviously completely different spatial effects, and your diagram actually looks like your concrete structure, which is always an exciting moment for anyone thinking of buildings. But then the other thing, of course, is that everything cantilevers, so not only the huge cantilevers of the balconies and sunrooms, but also stairs. So all our stairs kind of come off the building. We call this one Stairway to Heaven because it has this very poetic moment. And that is in the penthouse, so that, you know, there is kind of this idea of in and out weaving from the gym up to the roof, and also from the terraces around the living space. So the kind of extensions not only give this connection, but also start to carry material intelligence through. So different cladding, as you see here, wood starts to inform the inside. And then, of course, what we're all jealous of, you know, as architects, we build a lot of stuff we never, some architects do, but I don't see myself having that very quickly. This roof, which, you know, is definitely a very nice roof. And then, as we just finish it, I have photos which is sort of finished, but I haven't really officially photographed it yet, but it's kind of fun to see the Freedom Tower grow in the background as we finish the building. Over the last few months. And then, of course, as you see it's finished, it was been kind of interesting. I think the other benefit of the parametric is not just that we can come up with these forms, inform the people who make these forms very, very easily and very quickly, facilitate shop drawings, but also that we can order all these materials easily all over Europe. So what I got probably addicted to in Greenwich, I did the same thing here. So this curtain wall facade is made from a German system, Schuko. It's like you'll see in a minute, the inside extremely thin, gorgeous titanium finish. Huge glass expenses I cannot buy here. So I ship them from Italy, ridiculously enough, to actually have this kind of huge sheet of glass, which is happening here. And then the kind of idea of folding these spaces into each other so that you get these kind of very special moments where you really feel like you are framing your own house in this city where you constantly have to be reminded that there are other people present. But in this way of folding, you actually maybe don't. So these are the two triplexes as they start to negotiate. And then exciting was, it's a landmark building, and I managed somehow to convince the landmark committee that as every building in Tribeca is different, and it really is based on a system of steel and stone. All the old buildings are actually made from an interesting marble, and as we know, with cast iron. I convinced them that it was much more important to think of the quality of the old structures rather than exactly copying the old structures. So what we did is we took the neighbors' rhythm, combined them over our building, and started to create a pixelation, which is kind of a condensation of the rhythm of the neighbors. And again, actually with Bill, we figured out this facade in a very, very efficient way. So we have a possibility of making this pixelation without which is expressed on the inside as well without actually having mullions. We'd have to do that. So the mullions are very simple and straight, and all these pixelations are actually suspended from a very simple system, resulting in this kind of facade. And what is nice, it is actually a combination of translucent stone, translucent glass, and glass, which gives really interesting effects. At night it glows on the outside, and by day it glows on the inside. And really important for me was you have no idea how many floors are there actually behind it. So that is from the outside, but from the inside, you play with what you want to see. So sometimes you have a bedroom and you see kind of at your feet some sort of street scene, but they don't really see you. Or you see the sky, but maybe you don't want to see straight because you might not be wearing anything. So that kind of, I'm quite interested in voyeurism, as you might have noticed. That kind of voyeurism, I think, is really interesting to play with. And then I also noticed that the little stainless steel boxes of the pixelation carry not only these materials, but also catch the west light really interestingly. So you get these little sparkles on the facade when we have that moment. And then here you start to see some of the bathrooms where you see the different materials. So there's a stone here, stone there, and then the different glass. So it's kind of another way of seeing the neighbors. You get only glimpses of these kind of windows. It's kind of a completely different scale than a perforated normal building where you have a wall with windows. Or here, where you go from the bathroom to the living space, kind of the doors are all pivoting, so they kind of become screens themselves, and they're made in glass, so they kind of tend to reflect it. But all openable. I'm very interested in, you know, it's really kind of a funny thing. We went through this whole LEEDs time, and I never talk about green systems, but all our buildings are actually sustainable and are made out of quite simple materials and are passive solar energy. So passive solar energy is kind of a thing which is not so much used, but it's actually extremely easy to use and very, very effective. So, of course, natural ventilation, same thing. So all these facades open. And I think the idea of green architecture is really, you know, I think we should probably just consider that normal at this point. Here you see the very thin mullions on the inside and the extreme experience. So what we actually have is the thinnest potential cut from stone, which is very close to 1/8. So we actually almost use no stone, which is really nice. But you get really, it's almost like an X-ray of the stone within your house, which is, I think, quite an amazing effect. And then this is quite funny. If you look on the right-hand side, that's our car elevator. We couldn't figure out how to do the door, and so eventually we said, just sink it in the floor. And it's actually turned out to be really fun because it sinks in the floor and then the metal gate behind it goes up. So it's kind of this really strange event going on. And the doorman is super excited about it, so he decided to wave at me when he did this. But it's quite nice, and it's interesting to see your car sink in the ground for a difference. You know, it's like you never know whether it's going to be back up. We were able to investigate the kind of 3D-ness much better in China. China has difficult points and really great points. I think we were totally spoiled by having a European client in China. That was Sports 1961. It's actually here in the meatpacking district. And they did their store there, and actually the house I showed you earlier was for the owner of Ports, and then when we were working on the house, she was very interested in us having the store. So having us develop kind of a new branding for the stores. And I said to her, what I think is amazing about fashion is that it's so similar to architecture. They have a concept, they make construction drawings, they make patterns, and everything we love about current architecture is actually done in fashion in a similar way. They laser cut surfaces, they 3D print them as we do. And the shop I did was in Shanghai on the Bund, which since the 30s, this photo is actually from the 30s, has been this kind of center of not only kind of a bustling economy, but also of culture. And the Art Deco and harbor culture were collapsed right on that particular point. So looking at the harbor culture, we thought it'd be interesting when we did the shop to start to think of whatever contained the collection as a very organic unit, which could always adapt more or less to the space. And it's not unlike maybe how the lining of your coat adapts to your coat. So the coat was the building, and this was the lining we kind of imprinted as kind of the fit space, or the most optimized space. And we asked the client to buy an old wooden house and to recycle the wood, so that we would basically embed this digital liner with a very local recycled material. And then we basically gave him this 3D model. It was CNC'd, computer CNC'd out of the space. And quite funny, it has very digital and electronic and kind of mechanical systems imprinted in it as well. So all the air conditioning vents, the sound speakers, everything was actually recorded in this very rough wood, as well as niches and folds and all the other things. So it was quite a, it's one of those things you can do in China, which is fascinating. It's big machine running it for days on end. And then also the bottom panels where we had the smaller parts of the collection, so the scarves, the jewelry, the bags, were set on tables which were custom poured and were set in small pockets which were CNC to have light coming from above and beyond or below, so that there was a kind of an unpredictability to the light sources, but also in a way kind of a play that where you put the tables was completely random, and that you could inform these surfaces with information or just leave them quite neutral. The really beautiful thing was that they still have GRFC. It's something we developed here, I think, in the US in the 50s. It's kind of a fiber-reinforced concrete which you pour in molds. And so essentially the computer information was made into molds and the molds were prefabricated. And then they came to site with these units. And because it was fiber-reinforced concrete, they were able to finish them completely seamlessly. So you see from these kind of slivers which came to the ceiling, it in the end got kind of almost elastically or plastic in its environment, and then every seam was accentuated with small LED strips so that they really separated, but also the architecture itself became the light rather than adding light fixtures. And the only light fixtures we added were really the ones I showed you earlier in the platform, but also the ones which were then lighting the collection. So in the end, it looks like that. We also developed an idea. I always hate these plastic people who have to show your clothes, the ones with the spastic arms. So we decided to kind of create the busts or basically the tops of the body. We have these are like small metal frames with a beautiful canvas wrapped around it and kind of the old neck, how it used to be done in the old people who used to make suits by hand with copper wires. And then we have some which were actually sculpted in recycled wood as well, but they hadn't arrived here yet. So it was quite an interesting kind of endeavor to start to make the body before you actually make the fashion. And then here you start to see that skin, how it holds the collection and how basically everything you sell is in that kind of wood liner, whereas everything, the highlights of the fashion shows are actually suspended in the middle on these columns, which also get embedded seats and lighting, as I said before. So you get these moments where you can sit, where you can look at these small things and be wrapped in these kind of fluid spaces. Sometimes the walls are padded to just kind of get the acoustics under control and make sure that people can gossip and not being heard somewhere. This was right next to the fitting room. And also you can see the wood. We, again, didn't finish it. I think wood really needs to breathe. So here we just rubbed it with silver powder and oil to just leave it completely unfinished. And the fitting rooms have basically a mirror framed by mirror, as you can see here with lighting just by sandblasting the mirror surface off, and a pivot mirror behind you so you can actually see yourself in a kind of a more clear way. And this door was quite funny. The client called me at some point and said, "You forgot something?" And I was like, "Sure, I forgot something. I mean, we always forget something." But in this case, it was the exit door. And I said, "Well, we have recycled the whole surface. Why don't you find an old door and just recycle the door? And we'll treat it with fire retardant spray." And he took that very seriously and went shopping and found a 600-year-old door, which was pink and blue. I was like, "Yeah, that's a beautiful door, but it's pink and blue." And he said, yeah, don't worry. It's bronze under it and wood, so we'll clean it up. And so we got this amazing door, but still the wrong door handle here. I still have to rephotograph the door. But that's our fire door, so it's quite probably the most beautiful fire door and the most illegal fire door, I would think, but it's China. Sorry for the Chinese people. We really love the way you make things. So yeah, so this is the space looking back at it, and it was quite it was really good. I think, we've realized we moved, as everyone did, from small projects to big projects, and then I went back to small projects, because not only big projects take a long time, but also you realize that the small projects is where you actually do your inventions and where you can try things out. So some of that stuff, what we were talking about earlier, we tried out in this project we were working on with the mayor of Holon, which is kind of another part of Tel Aviv. And the mayor of Holon wanted to make a municipal hall completely different than the very top-down, monumental municipal halls which are currently or historically there. So the idea is that a municipal hall is actually a space where they build extra space, they can rent it out, and they can grow into, but also they really wanted to be completely accessible and transparent. So that was not only that, it was also housing, a music hall, and shopping. So the complete integration into the city, and as you can see, many cities have this problem, right? People cut huge highway, Robert Moses wasn't the only one, huge highways through the city, and then we get asked to fix that later. So we have a very large pedestrian unit with bicycle paths and pedestrian paths going over the highway, which actually is almost like this little thing is probably the most important part of the project, really, to stitch the whole thing back together. One thing we realized is that not only is Tel Aviv extremely hot, it also has a prevalent wind direction. And we decided to use that wind for a more sustainable idea of the tower. So to try to use this kind of chimney effect to cool the tower by night and then have a very cool surface by day, and make lungs into the building which actually contain that air as long as we could. So that actually that feature becomes the public space of the building as well as kind of the breathing of the building. And it also segments the building into parts which are actually part municipal and part rentable. So it's kind of organs within, like we have liver, heart, and kidneys within one skin and clearly distinguishable. Then, as I said, the municipal hall and the bridge is first, and we space this over time. But once the whole thing is built, it's really a very integrated system which really optimizes not only the connection to the buildings like as a system, but also gives a kind of a sort of secondary skin, a very perforated skin, to kind of create an environment by day which is really accessible. The people in Tel Aviv love to use their sandstone. It's white, very beautiful and very hot in the summer. So it was important to start to create this kind of secondary skin which actually makes this environment doable, and you have natural shading and misting under these kind of cantilevered surfaces, outdoor theater also, and a fountain to actually also help create. This is the music hall I'll show in a bit, but this is actually how you enter from that bridge to the municipal hall. The bottom layers are kept very open, and the lower level of shopping comes up here, but the bridge has itself like quite a bit of perforation. So the idea that it's not like a gigantic surface coming over different systems, but there is a constant penetration of systems up and down, as you can see here again. So the kind of integration of different levels started to be really important here. And then the natural ventilation didn't only happen in the tower, but also in the music hall, where kind of fins are made into the ceiling, opening the ceiling up and allowing natural daylight, but also doubling the scales of the building so that you get natural ventilation here. And the liner of the music hall is kind of embedded within that system. What was quite interesting to us is that the natural area of the kind of common area of that whole music center combined both academic learning of music systems, so there's an educational center here, as well as performance. So we made coffee shops and common spaces to be shared by everyone. And then this is how it would look at night. So these kind of perforations really start to glow and inform the other layers and kind of reflect back and forth. That also happened with the lungs into the tower, which at night strangely start to look the same, or kind of the inflected up surface of the perforations of the bridge itself. As you can see, one of the parts of the bridge also folds under here, so that there is kind of a very fluid system. Thank you.